we're on. Okay.
All right. I think I'm on.
Yeah, you're on.
Yep, there you are. You're good.
Okay. All right.
Let me find your questions here.
Hi, everybody. My apologies. I had to have my young technician help me with my first Instagram live session. So, a brief history. I shaped my first surfboard in fall of '69, and it was a twin fin. And my first couple of boards were actually twin fins by the Mirandon brothers. I spent a few years at UCSD, and I kept shaping, doing summertime work for a lot of the manufacturers in North County. And in the meantime, I was making music surfboards, inspired by Bill Castor and a few other great shapers. And he glassed my boards briefly, and then he just told me he was too busy. So I hooked up with John Durward at Canyon, and he was a glass shop. And he was glassing my boards, and he was glassing other people's boards, and he hit me up. He goes, "Hey, if I give you all my work, will you give me all yours?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I had a relationship with him from about '78 to '85. And in that time, my reputation grew, and I had all kinds of great surfers coming to me for boards even before Aki. But Aki was like my, he was like my, whatever you call it. He was like my landmark or whatever. And once Aki started writing the boards, at one point I had half the top 16 writing for me, or getting boards from me. And I finally decided, well, this is my third time. My first surfboards were called Music, and then I had another label, and then I decided to start Rusty Surfboards. I gave him my notice on 4th of July, 1985, and I honored 3 months of outstanding orders. And then in November, I think I started shaping Rusty Surfboards, and I just said, I don't know what I've done. I'm not sure I'm going to make it, but I got to give it a shot. And it took off, and I started doing T-shirts, and then about a year later, I started doing clothing, and the rest is history. The pros started dropping off one by one as the clothing company grew because of the conflict of interest, but I still had quite a few still riding my boards into the early '90s. So that's a brief rundown. I guess it's time to open up questions. And John Sitzler, loyal customer, John, asked, do you shape a board different for a front foot surfer or a back foot surfer? And I'd say it's more important for intermediate or advanced surfers, because there are some people that are heavy back foot or heavy front foot, and I take that into consideration. But most of the time, I try to shape a balanced surfboard, so yes, I do, but it's really on special needs. Rock Regan, do you have a fin suggestion for the Bali single? Yes. When I worked at GNS from 1971 to '74, I struck up a relationship with Skip Fry, and he was so into fins, and he taught me a lot, and I experimented with different layups. I mean, everybody was like riding 8-ounce fins because it took less layers and it was easier to make them, and I felt them stiff with terrible flex, and so I eventually ended up riding only 4-ounce layups. If I remember right, it was about 32 layers as opposed to like 10 or 12. And then I tried some G10, which is a composite material with about 50 layers, depending on the weight of the G10. But back to your question, I found roughly a 7.5-inch fin seem to work best in the Bali singles. A little smaller for shorter boards, a little bit bigger for bigger boards, but on average 7.5 inches. C.J. Rutherford, which board would be most similar to the old magic doors you used to make? I'm not sure which board you're referring to, but over the years I've built lots of kind of retro boards with modern twists, like the muffin top and the what's the other one that people still tend to order, Happy Shovel.
Yeah.
And when people ride on, they're psyched. And it's in the last couple of years, it's kind of become a real, kind of a trendy thing. Is kind of looking back at old boards. And I think for the average surfer, for average surf, it's actually a good idea. The old school fishes are great. They tend to be a little bit tracky. I make my modern versions of fishes with a touch more tail rocker and a touch more V, and that seems to loosen them up a little bit. I still keep the entry nose rocker kind of low because that's part of the fun in a fish, is how quick they paddle and how easy they catch waves. Next question. Which of your boards qualify for the Eco Board certification? That's a good question. It's a big issue these days. I first started doing EPS boards in the early to mid '80s. Specifically for certain contests and small waves, and kind of let it go until 2005 when Clark Foam closed. And it was like December, 21st or something like that. We got a nice little fax from Gordon Clark saying I'm out of business. And I thought, well, Gordon's got kind of a sense of humor, but I'm not sure about this. So I later that day I got on the phone with Greg Lohr, who I knew from my early GNS days, and he had been building EPS epoxy boards nonstop, and got some great advice from him. And I figured getting polyurethane blanks was going to be pretty rough for a while, so I embraced the EPS technology. And in the early days, people, store owners eventually started calling back a month or two later and saying, hey, the boards are turning really yellow. And I said, oh. But over the years, better and better epoxy resins have evolved that are cosmetically, they're clear, they're white. And
who designed the RDOT? That's a good one. Who designed the RDOT?
Oh, I got. Well, I just want to finish up on the ecological deal. I tried, 15, 20 years ago, I tried vacuum bagging, and I tried different foams. The XTR foam that's popular these days, a fellow from Peru came up, 15, 20 years ago. What was
20 years ago,
What was his name?
Pedro. From Peru.
Yeah, Pedro.
Vasquez.
Pedro Vasquez. He came up and showed me some blanks, and I was intrigued because, as it turned out, they're extruded styrofoam, which is basically waterproof. And it's been used here in the construction industry for decades, but it's all code marked blue. But he managed to source some that was white. And the biggest blank he could get was 7 foot. But we made quite a few of those. And but I'd say our most ecological board these days is probably the torsion spring.
Either torsion or EPS. They're in both. Well, EPS and XPR, they're same chemical thing.
Yeah.
Polystyrene.
Yeah.
So.
And I've been committed to epoxy for a long time, and I've been slowly trying to nudge our production more and more into epoxy, because epoxy works great on polyurethane too. You get a better flex, you get a more durable board.
Check some questions on the screen. There was a guy asking for who designed the RDOT. That's a good one.
Who designed the RDOT?
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on about that, but I did 97% of that. It just evolved from how I used to sign my name, R. Preisendorfer, because my name was so damn long. I figured at least I could shorten my first name, so I shortened it to R. And I did have a friend, Henry Hester, who worked at K-Pro, one of the original laptop companies. He helped me like blow it up and tweak it a little bit and everything. But yeah, the logo is basically mine. I have a history of the logo up on my wall in my office, and I'll try to post that in the next few days. What else?
There's some questions we can alternate.
Which of your what is the dozer designed for? The dozer is another one of those alternative type boards, shorter, flatter, wider, and it's basically designed for small waves, but it'll work up into slightly bigger surf too. And it's been a very popular design. We've had that in the line for about 12 years. What modern day shape did Rusty innovate? That's a great question, because there's a lot of shapers that claim, but if you go back in time, pretty much almost everything has been touched on by one shaper or another. And like the tri-fin, I'm sure there was longboard tri-fins. I don't know, I heard Carl Ekström experimented with them. Or
Asymmetricals?
Yeah, and asymmetricals. My first board was an asymmetrical. It was a 9.3 Carl Ekström, 1966 or 7. But I think the one thing that I think people who have been around for a while remember is at the beginning of the tri-fin era, the tri-fins were all very dome decks with the dome running all the way off the tail, and I was getting pressure from my team riders to go thinner and thinner, and I was so scared of running out of volume I started to flatten the decks. And I wasn't the first one to do flat decks. In fact, there was a whole Brewer school of thinking with pretty flat decks, but I'd say I was one of the early shapers to apply it to tri-fins, and I mean, even Simon has given me credit for the flat, thin tails with boxy rails. I'm not going to take claim for being the first one to design a particular board, but I've always been a curious sort of guy, and I've always experimented and tried new stuff, usually on the front end of it. What's my favorite thing about shaping? What's my favorite thing about shaping? I recently posted on my personal site the word ikigai, and that's a Japanese term for what it is you love to do, what it is you think about all the time, what it is you wake up in the morning and think about. And for me, ever since I shaped my first board, I've basically been obsessed with the whole process of shaping, hand shaping and computer shaping. Just designing surfboards has been really my main passion most of my life. Question here about a Wart. What? I've got a Rusty Wart. She's extremely fast. What about the concave and also the curve on the deck? Well, I think, honestly, the thing that makes the Wart fast is the story behind the Wart. It was originally a fish, an old school fish that was shaped and sitting in our outgoing racks for boards to go to the glasser, and it got bumped and knocked one of the the pintails or one of the corners off the swallowtail. And Rick Hammond, who's arguably one of the best shapers in the world, and he's been working for me for over 30 years, took it and saved it by putting a double wing roundtail on it, and thus the name Wart, double wing roundtail. And but it's got all the characteristics of a fish, really. Low rocker. It's not. I wouldn't call it a really heavily crown deck, but it's got fullish rails, and the main thing is the fuller outline and the flatter rocker is what really makes it go fast. I hope you can all hear me okay. This is my first time at this. What is it? Let's see. What's your favorite? My favorite wave? Gosh. There's several waves in Indonesia. I mean, I've been fortunate that I've been able to travel a lot because, it's part of my business. And I've been to Fiji countless times since the mid-'80s. And I thought for a long time restaurants was my favorite wave. But there are some lefts in Indo that, after a good session, you go, is there any better surf than this? And then blacks. I mean, I grew up surfing blacks. I started surfing blacks in '66. And I used to go down there after school at the end of the day, and there'd only be 6 or 8 guys out on a perfect Santa Ana day. I mean, that was legit blacks. 6 to 8 foot, 200 yard long waves, perfect. And to any of you who can still get a taste of that on the odd day, I think you'll appreciate it. The Mi Amigo. Is the Mi Amigo a great all-around shortboard? Yeah, I think it is. It's one of our high-performance shortboard designs. We named it the Mi Amigo because it's a little bit more user-friendly than like a comp-type board. A little bit wider tail, a little bit fuller rail, especially in the tail, thicker tail block. And the Mi Amigo, we still get orders for it. We get a lot of orders for the Model 8 and the Yes Thanks and what other shortboards do we?
Sister Brother.
Sister Brother, we still get orders, a lot of orders for. And there's people showing interest in the newer, I say newer, the flat deck boards, which is kind of revisiting what I kind of built my name on in the early 80s. We have the Blade, the Shiv, and the 419 Fish. And, once you get your head around the flat deck, I think most people really enjoy the feeling of being a little bit more on top of the water and a little bit freer board. What's your favorite high-performance shortboard for blacks, waves, and La Jolla? Any of our performance shortboards would work there. But specifically, like the Blackbird is designed for blacks, and Slayer 2, the kind of step-up boards. And kind of a weird story here. I started making myself Moby fishes 15, 20 years ago. And they're big boy fishes, 7, 6, 8 foot longer. And I went down the blacks one day, and it was the only board I had in the back of my truck, and I was thinking, it's 2 or 3 foot, but it ended up being 4 to 6 foot. And I was amazed at how well the board worked. It held its line, it held its rail. It went so fast, I never felt like there was a top end. And in recent years, some of the younger surfers, much smaller than me, the good surfers in La Jolla, have discovered, like their dads have the Moby fish, and they've ridden them out at some days at Big Dunamere and some of the other big wave spots of the land, they freaked and they ordered their own versions. And I go, well, do you want it smaller, thinner, narrow? And they go, no, I want it just like my dad's board. So, why is the Dwarf such an amazing board to ride? I'm still dreaming of my last Rusty. The Dwarf, I'm assuming you mean the Dwart, and I touched on it a minute ago. It's really a fish board, but by putting the double wing round tail on it, we found that it's easier to break your line and come up the face and do sharper turns, which has always been a problem with traditional fish. Let me see. I'll take some. Talk your team, best ever. Well, for years, especially as a clothing company grew, we had the money to, we were kind of forced into paying full coverage for team riders. In the early days, before my clothing company took off, guys, I think in 85, 86, 87, there's numerous covers on Surfer and Surfing magazine of Jeff Booth, who rode for Quicksilver. I don't know, many other surfers that rode for, Aki for Billabong and so forth. Sean with Instinct, and so I got all of that publicity, and the clothing company grew, so we were able to have our guys 100%. So we were able to start building the team again. Because of the pros that were getting boards from me, basically all got an edict from their bosses that they couldn't ride my boards anymore, or they're off the team, which was really a bummer. But I think our first 100% team rider was Kalani Robb, and it grew from there. And we always, because our roots are surfboards, we've always had a pretty strong surf team. Bring back the Denny sticker. You never know. It might come back. Can I get a free surfboard? Sure. We give them away all day long.
Talk about a little bit of the boards with Wade and the work that you've been developing with Wade Carmichael.
Oh yeah, Speaking of team, our newest team rider, Wade Carmichael. I'm psyched. I'm psyched on Wade. He's a great guy, nice guy, and he's. I'm not going to say any type of surfer is my type of surfer, but I really like power surfing and full rail surfing and big gouges, and he can bust an air, but I think he's a complete surfer. He's very well rounded, and he knows. He's pretty articulate about his boards, which until recent years with the computer shapes and how consistent the boards have gotten, I was always surprised at how little pro surfers actually knew about their boards. It was kind of more of a gut feeling. They'd pick it up and they go, nah. I've had not to throw anyone under the bus, but I've had guys that have ridden for me for years, and I make them all kinds of boards, and I go, how'd that board go? And they went, eh. And about 2 years later, this is one of the best team riders ever. He goes, man, I rode the best board today. I go, well, tell me about it. Who shaped it? He goes, well, you did. And I go, well, when did I shape it? He goes, a couple of years ago. I left it in the garage, and I just, it just didn't look right to me, but I rode it today, and it went insane. So, that leads me to what I do with custom boards. I've been pretty, in the last couple of years with the direct-to-consumer business increasing, I'm pretty much doing all customs now, and I do everybody's, from beginners to intermediate to advanced surfboards. I love doing customs, but I really have to coach a lot of people because it's like a pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid is the beginners. There's a lot of beginners, and then there's fewer intermediate surfers, and there's even fewer truly advanced surfers. But for the beginners, they try it, they like it, they're riding a 8-foot softboard, and they want to get with it, so they order a 6-foot performance shortboard, and I have to counsel them. And my recommendation is, please don't try to go more than 6 inches shorter than your previous board. The best thing about surfing is catching waves and then riding them. And if you're going from an 8-foot softboard to a 6-foot, 18.5, 2.25 inch wide board, you're in for a surprise and a lot of work. You might eventually grow into it, but my suggestion would be to go 7.6, 7.0, 6.6, and then after you spend a year or two hopefully improving your skills, then you should consider a true shortboard. But and I get a lot of guys ordering boards that are intermediate that order boards too small, and I have to coach them. A lot of times I compare them and their weight to one of our team riders, and I go, well, this is good if you're a pro, but you're not, so you should give yourself a few more liters, an extra ½ inch here and a couple inches in length. So for those that are thinking, well, I'll never get a Rusty, but no, please email us, service@rustysurfboards.com, and I personally shape 99.99% of all the customs, and I love doing it.
Talk about the volume a little bit. Kind of educate people.
The volume thing has really become.
It's an obsession right now. Right?
Yeah, it's what are you doing?
It's getting dark.
No, turn off the fucking lights. Oh. My technician tells me I need to wrap it up here pretty soon.
Directors?
But turn off the lights, please. Turn off the lights. But I think one of the last things I want to touch on is volume. With the advent of computer shaping, the computers figure out the volume, and everybody's got volume charts and calculators on their websites, and I've done a blog on it. It's for a pro. A pro might feel a ½ liter difference. A ½ liter is like it's like an average piss or half a beer, and your weight's going to fluctuate way more than a ½ liter a day. A liter, yes, I think an advanced pro surfer can feel a liter, but an intermediate surfer, please don't ask me to make it not 2 liters, but 2/10 of a liter less, because that is a few swipes of the sanding screen. And I'm being the devil's advocate, but there are so many other design features that you should familiarize yourself with. The list is endless, like rocker, and that's the beauty of a custom board, is I can give you a stock board, but I prefer to try and find out what and how you like to surf and what your skill level is, and I can do minor tweaks to stock boards to make them ride better for you, the individual. And rocker tweaks, balance point on the thickness, balance point on the template, wide point up a little bit maybe, or wide point back, depending on your stance. I don't know if I said width, but width. A lot of people kind of go too narrow. But like I say, trust your shaper. Give your shaper, whether it's me or someone else, a little bit of leeway. And the bigger the board, the more volume involved. So if you're getting a 9-foot longboard, please don't fuss over 2/10 of a liter, which I've had people do. So a couple more questions. Damon Hayes, big shout out, buddy. Damon worked for us for years. Rusty Australia, team manager. You're the best.
Demo.
Mano. What was the tech behind your 5-fin? The 5-fin,
I think he's talking about the C5.
the C5, yeah.
Two small tweezers, yeah.
Yeah, it was, it actually started as, the idea came from the Bonzer, the Campbell brothers. And, it was a great design. I had my issues with their fin setup, but I think the concave structure was brilliant. So I think it was 93 or 94. Nick Carroll, he was the editor of Surfing magazine. He said, hey, we're doing a board test. You shape whatever you want, whatever you think the future is. And so I made him a board that was like a Twinser, because I rewind a little bit. Martin Potter wrote a Twinser to the world title, or Twin Fin and a Twinser by Will Jobson. And I worked with Will for a while, had a license agreement with him. So we were building Twinsers and people loved them. But with Nick, I tried a 4-channel board with a Twinser fin setup but a small fin in the back. And he liked it. And so I pursued it. And so that's where the C5 came from. And we actually had a contest at Trestles in the mid or late 90s, a C5 challenge, and then the next year we had an anything but 3 fin challenge at Trestles. Somebody else wants a freeboard? Yeah, sure. Another free surfboard. Yeah, it's in the mail. Anyways, last question.
Cancel. You click on something. Just cancel. Yeah. What if I should?
Asha Fraser, I love you. Can you make me a surfboard for me and my cat to ride? I sure can, Asha. Jake, the hall monitor. What's Pedro riding right now?
The board we've been working, Rusty been working with Wade Carmichael. Oh my dimensions, of course, because Wade's bigger than me.
He might be bigger than you, Jake.
Yeah.
All the best to you, Jake, and all the best to all of you that tuned in tonight. And this is my first time, as I said, and I really enjoyed it, and look forward to catching up with you guys next Tuesday. Take care, and be safe, and stay healthy.
Bye.